Hi mathematicians, today in math you're going to need your math notebook, highlighters, a pencil, glue stick, and your blue resource folder that's inside of your anchor binder. Remember, do not take out your blue folder, but leave it right tucked inside. Go ahead and open up that blue folder. We're going to be taking out our new lesson information from the left side for our teach page, so carefully take off your black clip. Take out the next page, which is page 16 only. Set it to the side. Then carefully make sure you clip all the teach pages back together. Then on the right side, you're going to go ahead and undo the paper clip. Take out your classwork page, and then paper clip everything else to the back of your folder. Close your blue folder and make sure it's still inside your anchor binder, and go ahead and tuck that away. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to insert the information for our lesson in our table of contents. So open up your math notebook, and we're going to turn to the table of contents. This is going to be the next page, so we need to double check what page that's going to be. So yesterday's lesson, we had pages 14 and 15 for classified triangles. So that means if we very carefully turn one page and one page only, we should be on the back of page 15. And this is going to be 16 for us today. On the right side, go ahead and write 17 because we're going to use this side as well. So go ahead and turn back to the table of contents. On the left margin, you're going to put a number 16 to indicate the page this lesson is on. We're going to write today's title of the lesson is Classify Quadrilaterals. And then today's date is 8-26-20. Once you're done writing your table of contents, go ahead, flip back to the pages that we just marked. We're going to take our teach page that we just took out, flip it over, use your glue stick. Remember to make your frame around the outside using that glue stick, and then the X through the middle to ensure that it's going to stay put. Then turn it over, smooth it out to make sure it's nice and stuck. Before we get started with our left side page, we're going to go ahead and set up the right side page. So today we're getting in the habit of what's going to be expected on the right side, which is going to be our further practice problems. So on the top line, you're going to write the word example. So this section is going to be used for Mrs. Ling to give you an example of a problem, focusing on the content that we're learning. And then about halfway down, we're going to write the word practice. This is also going to be an opportunity for you to do additional practice of the same skill, but this time trying it on your own before you check the work with Mrs. Ling. In the future, we're going to add one final section to the right side, which will be called our reflection. And we will start that at a later time. Now that you have your pages set up, we're going to go ahead back to the left side and we're going to highlight today's title. Today's lesson is going to be now on classifying quadrilaterals. Yesterday we were able to classify triangles using two different methods. One is to measure the inside angles of a triangle, and the second was to tell the measurement of the outside lines. So we were able to classify in two different ways. Today we're going to be classifying quadrilaterals based on characteristics we're going to learn in this flow chart. So let's start at the top where we have our definition for our word quadrilateral. So we're going to highlight it with a different color, just the vocabulary, because we want to make sure that is the word that we're focusing on learning and being able to use. A quadrilateral is a polygon with 4 sides. So I want to make sure that I remember it's 4 sides and 4 angles. Some quadrilaterals have special names. Well, when I look at the word quadrilateral, I notice right away that there is something called a prefix. The prefix in the word quadrilateral is quad. So go ahead and circle the word quad. This indicates that if we're using the word quadrilateral, that it is referring to something that has 4, because quad means 4 sides or 4 angles. So quad equals 4. So when I think of the word quadrilateral, if I remember the affix or the prefix starts with the word quad, meaning 4, I can remember that a polygon that has 4 sides and 4 shapes is named quadrilateral. Now that we know that all 4-sided shapes are quadrilateral, we're going to then specify more specific names of the shapes that are coming up. And we're going to do this by using what's called our flow chart. A flow chart means I'm going to start at the top. So we're going to put start here. And then as we get more specific with certain attributes or characteristics of our polygons, we're going to give it more names. So we're going to start at the top, work our way down as far as we can go. It does not mean that we always will go all the way down. It just means we always start at the top and then we go as far as we can until we no longer can fit any of the characteristics of that next shape. So if we say we're starting at the top, that means that we're once again starting with the word quadrilateral. So if you highlight the word quadrilateral, underneath it is the characteristics or the attributes of what makes that particular shape. So quadrilaterals are 4 sides and 4 angles. So we know that. From the flow chart, you have 2 ways you can go. So if it's 4 sides, 4 angles, you can also get more specific by either going to the right and saying it could be also called a trapezoid, but the only way that it's called a trapezoid is if it follows the next set of attributes. So this is exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. If it has only 1 pair of parallel sides, like it does in this particular trapezoid, then it can no longer get any other names. It would only be known as a quadrilateral and a trapezoid. If it has more than 1 pair of parallel lines, then we're going to the left side of the flow chart. So we go to the next shape called a parallelogram. If it's a quadrilateral and a parallelogram, that means that it's going to have 2 pairs of parallel sides. So if we said all shapes that have 4 sides and 4 angles are called quadrilateral, we can then further name it either a parallelogram if it's 2 pairs of parallel sides, or a trapezoid because it only has 1 pair. So we need to remember that's an or situation. So it can't be both, it can only be one. If it's a quadrilateral and then we move down and say it's also a parallelogram because of the 2 pairs of parallel sides, well, now we can once again go to the next step of identifying our polygon. The first direction we can say it could go is to a rectangle. And a rectangle has the attributes of 4 right angles and 2 pairs of parallel sides. So we can see that second attribute is also what makes it a parallelogram. So the rectangle only added that it has 4 right angles. Well, if our parallelogram does not have 4 right angles, we would then go to the right side to say, well, it could be called a rhombus instead, because a rhombus has 4 sides of equal length. But you can also see in this particular example, it looks like the box kind of was slouching, maybe something heavy sat on top of it and it's starting to collapse. So our rhombus is 4 sides of equal length. And oftentimes we are able to say that they're equal because we use what's called a tick mark. A tick mark is just a line that we draw through each of the sides to say that they're the same length if we measured them. It's also important to note that this particular shape of a rhombus has no right angles. So we went from quadrilateral to then further naming it either a parallelogram for 2 pairs of parallel sides or a trapezoid because it only has 1. If it was a parallelogram, we can further name it either a rectangle for having 4 right angles or a rhombus for having 4 sides of equal length. Just like we've been doing with our flow chart, we have one final name that it could possibly be. It doesn't always work out this way where it goes all the way to the bottom. But if you can further link the attributes or characteristics of this polygon to your particular shape, then you will give it the final label. This final label that a polygon could have, if it's a quadrilateral, could be a square. So a square's attributes are 4 right angles, but it also has 4 sides of equal length. And both of these attributes, you can see, came from the 2 shapes from above. So if it had the 4 right angles, but it also has 4 sides of equal length, we would then consider it a square. So we're using this flow chart starting at the top with a broader label of a quadrilateral, and then working our way down to be more specific in our labeling of our 4-sided polygons or quadrilaterals. When we now look at the example, we're going to need to read the directions to know what it's asking us to do. So it says to classify each rectangle as many ways as possible. So I'm going to highlight that particular part so I remember that it doesn't want me just to necessarily give it a one name, but as many as it possibly reflects. I can write the word quadrilateral, trapezoid, parallelogram, rhombus, rectangle, and square. So the first one I'm going to look at is how many sides does it have? It has 1, 2, 3, 4. So right away I can see that it is first called a quadrilateral. Working my way down the flow chart, I'm able to determine, is it a parallelogram or a trapezoid? So parallelogram says 2 pairs of parallel sides, or a trapezoid, it's only 1. When I look at this shape, the 2 sides, and I'm going to use my highlighter just to make sure I look, the 2 sides are considered parallel because they will go on forever in either direction without touching. But when I look at the top and the bottom, those lines, if I extended them, and I use my dotted lines to show they're going to actually cross paths. So that is not a parallelogram because it doesn't have 2 sets. It is a trapezoid because it's exactly 1 pair. So the next line, I'm going to write the next label of trapezoid. Once I've written trapezoid, I remember in my flow chart that that is where I have to stop. I can't give it any other labels. So we move on to number 2. Number 2, we start with the same part of our flow chart at the very top. So the first identifying label could be quadrilateral. So we say it has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So the first label is a quadrilateral. The next one is the second place in our flow chart working our way down. It is either going to be considered a parallelogram or a trapezoid. So parallelogram, once again, has 2 sets of parallel sides. So I'm going to use my highlighter to record them. This time the top and the bottom are parallel because they could go on forever in either direction and never touch. And then my sides are a second pair of parallel sides because they can go top to bottom and never touch. So this particular shape for number 2 is also considered a parallelogram. So we write that on the second line. Because it's going on the left side of our flow chart, we now have 2 options to continue. We can see, is it a rectangle or is it a rhombus? Or do neither one of these apply? So rectangle is 4 right angles, 2 sets of parallel sides. Well, we know that that part already works, but the 4 right angles, I can see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4. In this particular figure, they've given me the 4 boxes to indicate right angles. So this already, I can tell, matches the attributes of a rectangle. Remember that some figures don't give us the boxes, so you can always use a sticky note and place that corner in the corner of your shape to see if it matches. Now that we've gone from quadrilateral to parallelogram to rectangle, the final label that it could possibly be is a square. And if it meets the criteria, then we'll write it. The criteria for square is 4 right angles. We've already are able to see that. And the final one is 4 sides of equal length. Well, we talked about equal length is identified by using the little tick marks. And the tick marks have to be the same amount of ticks on each side. So there's 1 tick mark at the top, 1 on the right side, 1 on the bottom, 1 on the left side. So that indicates equal length. So the last label for number 2 is a square. Then we're going to go to number 3. Number 3, we're going to start at the top. So once again, it's a 4-sided shape, so we write quadrilateral. Then we move down our flow chart to say, It's going to either be a parallelogram or a trapezoid. Parallelogram, 2 sets of parallel sides, so I get out my highlighters. I highlight the lines in the same color that would be considered parallel, so top and bottom never touch. My sides are both slanted in the same direction, so if they did go on forever, they wouldn't touch as well. So the next label would be a parallelogram. After parallelogram, we then determine whether or not we can go on to label it a rectangle or rhombus. So a rectangle for right angles. These are not right angles because our angles are slouched. It looks like our box is collapsing. So those are going to be obtuse and acute. So we can't go to rectangle, but let's look at rhombus. Rhombus is 4 sides of equal length. Well, when we look at the tick marks, we see that the top and the bottom match because those both have 2, and the sides match each other, but they don't all match the same amount. So we cannot give it any further labels. So this shape is only a quadrilateral and a parallelogram. The last 2 that we're going to do on the right side, we're going to draw our own shapes. So I'm going to ask you to follow along. You're going to draw yourself a rectangle standing on its shortest side. You're going to give each of the corners a box. And then we're going to place some tick marks that match the one you see I'm drawing. When you're done drawing, go ahead and pause the video and then give the labels that will help specify the attributes of the figure drawn. Then you push play and check your work. So for this particular one, you should have labeled quadrilateral. It's a 4-sided 4-angle shape. A parallelogram, because it has 2 pairs of parallel sides. And this is also considered a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. There are no other attributes that we can show. In your practice, I'm going to give you one final shape. This one's a little challenging. So it's a short line at the top, skip a few lines and draw a longer line at the bottom. The left side is going to be a line straight down, and then the right side is going to be at an angle. I want you to do the same type of work. Label all of the names that apply to this shape, pause your video, and then come back and check your work. This particular one, we would start by saying this is a quadrilateral because it's a 4-sided shape. Oops. The second name would be a trapezoid. When we look at a trapezoid only has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides, and that would be the top and the bottom. The sides would eventually cross paths and intersect. When you're done with your notebook work, your classwork today is practicing classifying the quadrilaterals. So write classwork on the page that you took out of your blue folder. You're going to work on the even numbers only. You're going to circle number 2, 4, and 6. Those are working on the same type of labeling that we just practiced together. At the bottom, you're going to work on number 8, the first word problem. And then turning over, you're going to once again complete 2, 4, and 6. Remember, your job is to take a picture of both sides of your math notebook page and both sides of your classwork to submit to me today. We will review your classwork tomorrow in morning work time.